debates, you can watch it and get all of our City Club's election coverage on our website, pdxcityclub.org. City Club is an organization that has been dependent on ticketed event revenue for a long time. But in this new all-digital world, we're having to take a different approach. So I'm asking you to donate today. If everyone watching this donated $5, we would reach our goal and be able to continue offering free programming to help democracy flourish. Donate now by texting Support City Club to 44321. That's Support City Club, one word, to 44321. I also want to encourage folks to engage in the conversation online as if we were all in a room together. Send us your questions and comments online by emailing us at questions@pdxcityclub.org, or engage with us on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook using @pdxcityclub and or the hashtag CityClubDebate. You can also, of course, use the YouTube comment section. Whether you ask a question, share a link with a friend, or just watch the debate to get informed, all of us at City Club want to thank you for participating today. Thanks also to our sponsors, SEIU 49, The Standard, and Northwest Natural, in addition to our amazing media partners, X-Ray FM and KGW. Democracy must press on. In fact, our last online election-related program is 1 week from today, May 8th, for our May ballot measure forum. Mark your calendars and subscribe to our YouTube channel today, youtube.com/pdxcityclub. Now, please join me in welcoming today's candidates for Portland Metro District 5, Cameron Whitten, Karen Spencer, Chris Smith, Mary Pavito, and Mary Nolan. In a moment, each candidate will have 2 minutes to introduce themselves before we dive into our questions for the day. Each question has a 60-second time limit for candidate responses. And at the end, each candidate will have 2 minutes for a closing statement. There's a timer off screen that only the candidates and I can see, which will indicate when time is up. We ask the candidates to finish your statements and responses when your time is up, or I will chime in with a friendly but firm reminder. I am so grateful to all of the candidates we have had on our digital stage in recent weeks who have done an amazing job of respecting the time limits and their colleagues, and I have no doubt that today will continue that trend. So let's get started. The speaking order was determined at random ahead of time, and we'll begin with opening statements. The order will be Karen Spencer, Chris Smith, Mary Nolan, Cameron Whitten, and then Mary Pavito. So let's begin with that opening statement. Karen.
Thank you, City Club members, and thank you, Colin, for moderating, and thank you, Abel, for your sign language. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the wonderful opportunity today to talk about issues that are so important for the future of our region. I first came to the Portland metropolitan region 20 years ago, looking at a terrific job opportunity. And that's when I fell in love with our area. I fell in love with the natural spaces, our tree-lined streets, our parks, and thought it was so wonderful how friendly and nice and welcoming and neighborly our community is. And on top of that, I was going to be able to buy my own home, something I couldn't do where I was, and I was going to have a decent commute. And for that reason, my priorities are very similar to what I loved about our community and what I still love about that. And that is ensuring that we have affordable housing, safe, reliable transportation options, and environmental stewardship. And those are my priorities. And I'm uniquely qualified to sit on the Metro Council because I have in business, in law, and in science. I've held leadership positions throughout my career, both in the business sector and also in the volunteer space. I will bring diversity to the council. I'm the only woman of color in a race, in this race or any other race for Metro. And my focus will be really on ensuring that we have healthy, vibrant communities where folks can live, play, and thrive. Thank you for this opportunity today.
Thank you very much, Karen Spencer. Chris Smith, please share your 2-minute opening statement with us.
Thank you. Thank you to City Club for providing what I think is the only live public debate in this race, and for overcoming the challenges of the moment to continue to inform voters. City Club can take some of the credit for me being here. In 1997, I volunteered for a City Club study committee on how to implement residential density in Portland. By the time our committee delivered its report, I was the transportation chair of my neighborhood association. Since then, I've pursued the twin policy challenges of land use and transportation through literally dozens of boards, commissions, committees, and campaigns. You can see the full list on christophermetro.com. Some of the significant stopping points in that journey include service on two major policy committees at Metro and the Board of Portland Streetcar. I spent the last decade on the Portland Planning and Sustainability Commission, dealing with the challenges of housing availability and affordability, transportation equity and sustainability, and overcoming the legacy of our history of exclusionary zoning. At the beginning of this journey, I probably would have described the overarching frame of my work as urban sustainability. But over time, this has, with increasing urgency, become about climate change, trying to prevent the worst impacts of climate change, adapting to the degree of climate change that's already locked in, and ensuring that as we transition our infrastructure and economy to a post-carbon world, we create opportunity for those who have been exploited by their current structures. This land use and transportation work is the heart of what Metro does, and I'll bring 2 decades of intense experience to the role of Metro Counselor. As former Metro President David Bragan said in his endorsement, Chris is uniquely qualified as a leader on the planning and environmental issues that are the heart of Metro's mission. Metro is also increasingly being called on to be a housing and housing services funder, and I encourage you to vote for Measure 2610, the Housing Services Measure. I'll bring everything I've learned about housing to help Metro step up into its new central role in housing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris Smith. Mary Nolan, we would appreciate hearing your 2-minute introduction. Mary, I think you might be muted.
I got it. Thanks, Colin.
Excellent. Happens to all of us.
Thanks. Since Chinookan peoples first settled along the river we call Willamette, this land has been special. Today, Portlanders are caring neighbors, innovative workers, nature enthusiasts, and just a beautiful rainbow of cultures, beliefs, and dreams. Together, we do bold things, like putting our ocean beaches in public ownership, voting by mail, assuring sanctuary for humans in need. We are amazing, yes? I'm Mary Nolan. I'm running for Metro Council because we need Metro to work really well, especially as we lift ourselves, our neighbors, our local economy out of the pandemic. I've created and led and empowered diverse coalitions focused on Portland and Portlanders, engineering the cleanup of the Willamette and Columbia Slough, co-founding Oregon NARAL, CEO of Planned Parenthood Advocates, finding funding to build thousands of affordable homes, advancing climate-friendly transportation options, writing racial equity, disability rights, and LGBTQ justice into our laws. I'm smart enough and humble enough to know I don't have all the answers. No one does. What I have is the temperament and leadership skills to convene experts and stakeholders to forge solutions to entrenched, difficult challenges. I will make sure Metro's housing bond program delivers clean, conveniently located homes that are truly affordable. If voters approve homeless services, I'll focus it on moving people quickly off streets and into safe spaces. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mary Nolan. Cameron Whitten, please share your 2-minute opening with us.
Thank you, Colin. And as a member of City Club's Advocacy and Awareness Committee from 2013 and 2016, it is an honor to be here for this virtual town hall. My name is Cameron Whitten. I'm a community activist, a small business owner, a nonprofit executive, and I'm running for Metro because I bring a unique combination of lived experience, of executive leadership, and policy vision that Metro has never seen before and can benefit a lot from. At one point, I was an 18-year-old homeless youth on the streets of Portland. For 2 months, I spent every single night worrying whether I would be turned away from a shelter bed and have nowhere to go. Living at the margins with real daily struggles gave me a unique perspective into the deep inequities in our society. But I also saw the best of Portland. And it was thanks to the generous help of local nonprofits and the people behind them that I wasn't turned away from shelter. Since then, I've had the privilege to give back to the very same community that was here when I needed it the most. I've served some of our most vulnerable Portlanders as the executive director of local nonprofits, such as Know Your City and the Q Center. But we are facing a crisis in our region: growing inequality, a looming climate emergency, and the fact that our communities are more diverse than ever. And yet we are seeing our policies and institutions stagnate and leave people behind. Because of my lived experience, I understand the urgency. Because of my track record of advocating for others, I know I can do the job. I have sat on advisory committees for PBOT, Portland Bureau of Transportation's Bureau Advisory Committee, for TriMet's Transit Equity Advisory Committee, for Multnomah County's Levy Oversight Committee, and I'm bringing the fight to Metro because we need bold regional leadership. I'm honored to have the endorsements of over 150 community leaders and organizations, and it speaks to my vision for Metro Council, working with a broad, diverse, and inclusive coalition so that we have bold solutions that benefit all Portlanders. That's my vision. I hope you'll be a part of it, and I hope to have your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Cameron. See, even I leave myself on mute. Thank you very much, Cameron Whitten. Mary Pavito, if you want to round us out with your 2-minute opening statement.
Thank you, Colin, and thanks to City Club. As you said in your opening statement, civic participation was important before the pandemic. It's more important now to elect strong leaders. 10 years ago, I sought to fix a problem in my neighborhood that was putting my children at great risk. And that problem was air pollution and environmental toxins. And it didn't take me long to realize that this air pollution was actually a small part of a much bigger systemic problem, bigger than my neighborhood, bigger than this district and the region, honestly. I realized that my children would not be safe unless all children were safe. And I realized that in order to make sure all children are safe, that the system had to change. I never expected to launch a whole new career as an environmental nonprofit executive director with a mission in work for which I honestly had zero credentials, but I did very deliberately do that. My name is Mary Pavito. I'm running for Metro Council to fight those who pollute our air, who threaten our climate. I'm fighting for our families and for public health. I have a track record of success doing just that, including directly negotiating millions of dollars of cleanup actions by industry and getting the Oregon State Legislature to pass 2 landmark air quality bills. A stay-at-home mom looking for a school lunch program shouldn't instead find poisonous air pollution at her children's school and have to start a nonprofit to convince regulators to regulate. Students from a historically African-American neighborhood plagued by air pollution from the freeway that runs through it shouldn't have to be standing on an overpass fighting the expansion of that freeway outside their school windows. And our children shouldn't have to go to Salem to convince our leaders to take action on climate. I'll be a voice at the decision-making table who convene all the voices, including impacted communities, to hear that we need to hear from to find solutions to our biggest problems based on shared values and real lived experiences. And I'm really looking forward to the discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Pavito. Let's begin and dive into some of those issues. So in recent years, we have seen Metro's scope of work and activities grow to include directly planning and funding transportation infrastructure and funding and coordinating housing development and potentially housing services. Do you think Metro is doing the right set of activities to deliver on its goals? Are there things you think Metro needs to stop doing? Or are there things that Metro should add to its portfolio? We'll start with Chris, then Mary Nolan, then Cameron, then Mary Pavito, then Karen. Chris, start us with your 1-minute response. Do you think Metro is doing the right set of activities to deliver on its goals? Are there things you think Metro needs to stop doing? Or are there things Metro should add to its portfolio?
Thank you. The short answer is yes. Metro has the right portfolio of activities. The biggest change recently, of course, has been around housing. First, the Affordable Housing Bond Measure last election cycle, and now the Housing Services Measure in this election cycle. And I think it's important to understand that Metro has gotten into those areas because the community in the region has asked Metro to do so. It's not like Metro went out looking for a new job. And the reason that Metro is the natural place for that is that our homeless crisis, our affordable housing crisis don't stop at a city or county boundary. They are truly regional in scope. And Metro is the single entity that can raise revenue throughout the region is able to take advantage of that and have one tax for homeless services instead of having each county have a separate tax that maybe has different taxing levels. And I've served on MPAC, which is the body where Metro councilors meet with local elected officials to kind of form consensus around this. And I think that's an important check on the system. Metro shouldn't get into areas that there's not consensus and MPAC doesn't agree that they belong in.
Thank you, Chris. Mary Nolan, tell us about your perspective on the scope of work and whether there are things Metro needs to stop doing or start doing.
Thanks, Colin. I agree that Metro needs to be involved. Am I on? Yes. Thanks. I agree that Metro needs to be involved in the issues that it has recently taken on at the community's request, particularly at the request of the 3 counties and the cities within Metro, because these issues, open spaces, habitat, transportation, housing market, affordable housing, and homeless services don't stop at county lines and they don't stop at city lines. I do think, though, Metro needs to be more assertive in the way it engages in these processes. Metro shouldn't be duplicating effective work that is being done by the local governments, nor effective work that is being done by nonprofits. But as we are seeing, for example, with homeless services, that work isn't sufficient. It isn't solving the problem. And the opportunity Metro has, and that I want to bring to the council, is to be smarter about how we coordinate all those services.
Thank you, Mary Nolan. Cameron Whitten, do you think Metro is doing the right set of activities? Are there things you think it should stop doing, or are there things it should add to its portfolio?
Thanks, Colin. For the last 30 years, Oregonians have had the unique opportunity to see the benefits of elected regional government. We have seen a lot of innovations on a regional level because of that, but we also know there have been growing pains and challenges. I want to give a shout out to the arts community, which before we had this pandemic was already dealing with the struggle of our Portland 5 art centers, which Metro acquired during its time. And we are struggling to keep our promise to our arts community to keep venue spaces affordable. So the important thing is that, yes, as government, we have to address issues of changing need. We have to get it right. A great example is this Homelessness Services Fund, which was local governments and nonprofits. The 3 heads of the counties came to Metro saying, we need a regional strategy. We need to continue to listen to the needs of our community and give that diverse, effective leadership when it's needed the most.
Thank you, Cameron Whitten. Mary Pivito, tell us what you think about Metro's scope of work and whether there are things it should stop or start doing.
One of the reasons I was really inspired to run for Metro Council was because of the work that they are doing right now to address really critical regional needs at a regional scale, that they can bring a unique perspective to that. Certainly the affordable housing construction bond was a huge demonstration project of what Metro regional governments can do. And as well, I'm a huge supporter of the homeless services bond measure that's on the ballot this May. I believe Metro was actually created exactly for that reason, so that our cities and counties could come together and address regional issues in an efficient manner. I think it gives us a very unique opportunity to convene conversation in a collaborative environment to talk about how we move forward together. And I would continue to ask Metro to look at and have the flexibility to continue to look at what is the region bringing it to it as a government to address, and how can it convene that conversation and bubble up the best ideas that we have.
Thank you very much. And finally, Karen Spencer, do you think Metro is doing the right set of activities, or are there things it should stop doing or start doing?
I believe that Metro is largely doing the right set of activities. Its charge is our economic and ecological sustainability over the long term. And through the leadership of Sam Chase and many others, we started tackling our houselessness issue and our need for affordable housing. And I believe that Metro should continue along that path. And what I've seen is that when Metro acts as a catalyst for others to engage in the conversation, we can get great things done. I was on Metro's Nature and Neighborhoods Capital Grants Committee, and it was amazing to see all of the wonderful work that's being done in our community and how Metro helped foster change in our neighborhoods for park spaces and natural areas. I believe that Metro should start looking seriously at intermediate and long-range planning as we come out of this economic recovery. And that would be my one thing.
Thank you very much. Metro, as you've started to hint at, all of you, Metro is an agency that is constantly needing to compromise, both among the sometimes divergent interests of its far-flung constituents and between the various sort of tensions that bubble up in its multi-pronged mission. Tell us about a time when you had to compromise in order to deliver positive outcomes for constituents. We'll start with Mary Nolan, then Cameron Whitten, then Mary Pivito, then Karen Spencer, then Chris Smith. Mary Nolan, please get us started.
A minute is not nearly enough time for this because I spent 12 years in the legislature, 3 terms in the minority, 1 term in an absolutely split House, and 2 terms in the majority. It is about finding common ground while you hold on to your principles. I balanced the state budget, had to make compromises with my co-chair, with other members of the House, with the Senate. There were times when I talked with constituents, wanted to help them, wanted to fund their program, and couldn't because there were too many other compelling issues. And after meeting with them, I walked into my office and sobbed, literally sobbed, because there was so much that I couldn't do. What's important to know is that out of all that, I emerged with a reputation of candor, openness, collaboration across the political spectrum. And that's the kind of approach, the demeanor that I'll bring to the Metro Council.
Thank you, Mary Nolan. Cameron Whitten, tell us about a time when you had to compromise in order to deliver positive outcomes.
Thanks, Colin. Years ago, I was outside of City Hall on a 55-day hunger strike, bringing visibility to the housing crisis, which at the time our government was taking too slow action on. And near the end of that hunger strike, the Oregonian editorial board actually wrote an op-ed and said I was asking for 3 impossible things and that I needed to change my strategies. I ended that hunger strike, but I did not give up my passion and fire for affordable housing. I joined the board of Reach CDC, our largest nonprofit housing developer in the region. I went down to the Capitol, helped to pass landmark legislation as a founding member of Oregon's Inclusionary Zoning Coalition. I've continued to be a champion for housing justice. And in that 8 years since that hunger strike, those 3 things have happened because our housing crisis has gotten worse. And that's why I'm running for Metro, because I do know that we have to really have pragmatic leadership that is committed strongly to these issues, and I want to bring that leadership to Portland. And it shows with the endorsements I have from regional leaders from across the region. I want to work with those folks to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mary Pivito, tell us about a time when you had to compromise to deliver positive outcomes for constituents. You are on mute, Mary.
Okay, I'll remember this is about constituents because I'm a mother of 3 daughters. I compromise every day to deliver outcomes. But yeah, I mean, on the work on air quality, definitely, and everything that Mary said about working at the state legislature is learning how to understand the compromises that are necessitated by that culture and still come out with positive outcomes. I've done it at, direct negotiations with industry on finding the best path forward that actually represents progress. And we really had to do it this last year in 2019 legislative session on our diesel bill. And, the idea that we could have statewide diesel standards, really we had to focus on who are the most impacted and where could we get the actual progress we needed to move forward on the issue of protecting people from dangerous, deadly diesel emissions. So we got them in the Portland metro area. It was a compromise to have to give up statewide, but we delivered for the most impacted. The people have been traumatized by this for years. So you always have to stay focused on where the progress can be happen and realize that, yes, there are difficult decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen Spencer, tell us about a time when you had to compromise to deliver outcomes for constituents.
So as a person who has worked in small, medium, and large-sized businesses, I'm working and collaboratively regularly in order to have positive outcomes. And certainly in my volunteer capacity on Portland Parks Foundation and Metro's Nature Neighborhoods Capital Grants Committee and the Portland Utility Board, we have worked collaborating. I'm proud to have the endorsement of current and former Metro councilors. And I think a good example of a specific incident was when we were looking at water filtration on the Portland Utility Board. There were a lot of strong opinions in the room, a lot of angry voices, and being able to listen, understand what folks were saying, dive down into the facts, ask compelling questions. I felt that that was my role as a representative of our constituents. And I wanted to make sure that I understood what everyone was saying and that I could make a reasoned decision based on my values. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Smith, round us out. Tell us about a time when you had to compromise in order to deliver positive outcomes for constituents.
Sure. One small example from my work on the Portland Planning and Sustainability Commission, we recently overhauled the bicycle parking code, something that hadn't been updated since the 1990s when we had many fewer people using bicycles. One of the quirks of the old code was that you were actually allowed to put the bicycle parking in the living unit, in the apartment or condo, as long as you provided a hook or rack as a designated space. And we saw silly things like bike hooks placed over beds or couches that just made no sense at all. So we initially proposed removing that provision. The housing industry, and particularly the affordable housing developers, pushed back and said, well, you may be forcing us to squeeze out living units. So we came up with a new concept, the bike nook, which is a storage space for a bicycle in an apartment that doesn't have to be used for a bicycle. You could store other things if you don't have a bike, but still preserve the objective of having quality bike parking. So we delivered the outcome that we wanted, but we're able to satisfy all stakeholders.
Thank you very much. Speaking of divergent interests, cities in the region are currently allowed to discourage infill housing with demolition taxes. They're allowed to mandate parking minimums and prohibit multifamily housing in desirable neighborhoods. To what extent should Metro continue to allow cities to block density? And to what extent should it work to curb those policies? We'll start with Cameron Whitten, then Mary Pivito, then Karen Spencer, then Chris Smith, then Mary Nolan. Cameron, start us.
Thank you, Colin. It's obvious that we are in a regional housing crisis. That's why we have seen our local governments, from cities to the state, put historic investments into affordable housing. Look at the reality. We have 80,000 units short of affordable housing in the region, and that's for all levels of affordability. We need to have courageous leadership, and Metro needs to be a part of that conversation. State legislators just passed historic legislation with House Bill 2001, 2003. Every single jurisdiction in our region needs to work together so that we have a regional affordable housing plan. If we can't build those 80,000 units with our current way that we build housing, we have to support things like residential infill. We have to realize that the way that we're building is not going to fit the needs of our future. We have to be looking at this 40 years down the future, and Metro needs to ensure, because of our role as a convener, that we're all being held accountable to preserving livability for all residents.
Thank you, Cameron. Mary Pivito, to what extent should Metro continue to allow cities to block density, and to what extent should it work to curb those policies?
Well, again, Metro, I think is the convener of the conversations of best practices to address these really big problems. And this what Cameron mentioned about the 80,000 unit deficit, we need to bring that table together and find out why the whole region isn't carrying the load to create the affordable housing we need. And I think Metro has a really unique role that many people often don't talk about, but I also think Metro controls and has all the other things that make our communities strong and great and creates the livability that we all want. It's the Parks and Nature Bond money. It's transportation funding money and it's other aspects that I think Metro needs to start coming together and saying that this isn't a smorgasbord, this isn't a buffet. We need to start having all of these resources in lockstep with the affordable housing that makes our communities great and strong across the region, and utilize our best resources that Metro controls to incentivize responsibility in these other areas. Thank you.
Colin?
I keep doing it. Thank you. Karen Spencer, you're up. What extent should Metro allow cities to block density, and to what extent should it work to curb those policies?
As I mentioned earlier, I believe that Metro works best when it is a catalyst for change. What I'd like to see with Metro is the promotion of best practices, and also to think of ways that we can encourage and foster those accessory dwelling units and infill. I'd much rather have a carrot approach first than the stick if necessary. And I want to make sure that we bring people together. And that's why I'm proud to have been endorsed by tenants groups as well as home builders. And I want to make sure that we have everybody at the table for the conversation as we talk about such a critical issue, which is my #1 priority, is housing, and how can we get more housing for our metropolitan region.
Thank you very much. Chris Smith, to what extent should Metro continue to allow cities to block density, and to what extent should it work to curb those policies?
Right. Well, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, we have a history of exclusionary zoning in this city and in this region. Large amounts of land are locked up in what you would call a single-family neighborhood, which really is a way of saying we don't want any more people here. We simply can't afford to do that if we're going to grow as a sustainable region. That's why in my work on the Planning Commission, I helped enhance the residential infill project, which is at City Council now. So that instead of saying you can have a duplex on any residential lot in the city, the code now says you can have a quadplex on any lot in the city. I do think that Metro should take the lead from the state and the provisions that were passed by the legislature and implement those in the regional functional plan so they can be enforced by Metro. And I agree with my colleagues who talked about the need for affordable housing to be in every city in the region, which currently is not the case. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mary Nolan, round us out. To what extent should Metro continue to allow cities to block density, and to what extent should it curb those policies?
You're talking with people who are running to represent one of the 2 most dense districts in the Metro Council. And all of us are concerned about equity around the region and how the people who live in District 5 contribute a fair share to the regional housing market, and other districts don't. But to get there, we have to understand that it isn't just about zoning. It is about how we coordinate transportation, open spaces, access to jobs, access to education. It's about all the land use planning that goes into building a livable, vibrant, prosperous region. And I think Metro has a critical role. It should use incentives. It should also set expectations. If cities don't want to comply with density obligations, then Metro shouldn't facilitate investing in infrastructure that is much less expensive to deliver in widely dispersed communities. We need to have a fair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Metro over the years has significantly branded itself as the sustainability agency. We know that more than 40% of Portland's emissions come from transportation, and that those emissions are recently on the rise. What role, if any, should Metro be playing to bring down transportation-related carbon emissions? We'll start with Mary Pivito, then Karen Spencer, then Chris Smith, then Mary Nolan, then Cameron Whitten. Mary Pivito, please.
Thank you very much. In the wake of the COVID crisis, we are seeing the contribution that transportation makes to our carbon emissions and our air quality. And we're getting to see it finally from the side of the benefit that we can get from those reductions. Metro has a significant role in this in a couple ways. One, it has the oversight capability for TriMet. Public transportation has to be a more viable option in our region for people to not drive a car if they choose not to. But we need public transportation to deliver and be more equitably growing ridership in proportion to our population if we're going to stay ahead of our carbon emission goals. Metro also has been convening a process on the transportation package. It needs to deliver better on carbon emission reductions than it currently is. It really needs to dial in. That could be a $7 billion investment in keeping this conditions that we're seeing today of improved carbon emission reductions. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen Spencer, what role, if any, should Metro be playing to bring down transportation-related carbon emissions?
I think Metro has a significant role to play in helping to bring down carbon emissions. We see it through this COVID-19 pandemic, how clear our air is. It's like everything is in 3D almost because it's so beautiful. And we have the opportunity now to make significant changes that will help bring down our carbon emissions. And I look at transportation in terms of how it impacts our housing situation. We have a lot of folks who are getting pushed further and further out of the center to look for affordable accommodations, and now they're having to commute even further. And so we need to make that much more efficient, much more reliable, and promote mass transit. I ride the bus, I ride the MAX, I ride the streetcar to get around because I believe in reducing our carbon emissions as much as possible. So we can do it at the individual level and then also at the government level. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Smith, what do you see as the role of Metro in bringing down transportation-related carbon emissions?
Well, of course, the first thing we should do is to stop widening freeways. I was the first public official back in 2012 to vote against the Rose Quarter Freeway expansion and help form the group No More Freeways that's exposing that expansion and now starting to look at other freeway expansions in the region. But more broadly, we need a big shift. We have to disincentivize driving. And at the same time, as my colleagues have mentioned, we have to improve transit. So the big policy shift would be to have an equitable system of congestion pricing and then take the revenue from that and apply it to transit so we can fund a much greater and much more frequent transit network within the city. Also, has been mentioned, the investment package that's being considered for the fall ballot simply doesn't do enough to move greenhouse gas reduction on its own. We need to add things like a regional youth pass to that package and hopefully remove some of the very auto-centric packages like the Airport Way overpass. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Nolan, what role do you think Metro should be playing in bringing down transportation-related carbon emissions?
Metro needs to be a bold, assertive, and future-oriented leader on this issue. Metro says that it wants to embed climate sustainability and natural environmental stewardship into its work, and it has so far produced a transportation package that makes an indistinguishable impact on greenhouse gases and air pollution. That's not nearly good enough. We need to step up. I will bring leadership. We have to measure the outcomes we want to achieve. We have to say we've got greenhouse gases at this level today. We want it to be 75% of that within 5 or 6 years. We want it to be 50% of that within 10 or 12 years. And we have to measure whether we're getting there. If the tactics we're using aren't improving things, we need to change tactics, and we need people who are bold enough to realize that and make the change. That's what I plan to do.
Thank you very much. Cameron Whitten, round us out. What role should Metro be playing to bring down transportation-related carbon emissions?
Thanks, Colin. We have a shrinking window to address climate change. Let's talk about transportation, but I also want to talk about the solid waste system. We know the mixed paper crisis that we're dealing with is leading to huge greenhouse emissions. We have to curb that too. When it comes to transportation, we all agree that our current $7 billion proposed package does not go far enough. But we also have to realize that we have crumbling infrastructure. the need for public transportation dollars for smart infrastructure. We don't have enough resources with that $7 billion. We have to look towards the future. We know that congestion is harmful to our environment, it's harmful to our economy, and it's harmful to our public health. And that is why I support congestion pricing. And that is a way for us to have sustainable revenue to fund huge priorities like public transportation, funding youth pass throughout the region, and ensuring that we continue to have a sustainable fund to fund new transportation challenges we'll have in the future. Metro also needs to support us as we emerge through this economy, knowing that we can find ways to work and play and pray together like we're doing today without having to rely on car travel. It's the thing that we have to do to save the world.
Thank you. So as some of you have hinted at, Metro has the authority to take over TriMet. Should it exercise that authority? Why or why not? We'll start with Karen Spencer, then Chris Smith, then Mary Nolan, Cameron Whitten, and round out with Mary Pivito. Karen Spencer, should Metro exercise the authority to take over TriMet? Why or why not?
I do not believe that Metro should exercise that authority. Metro is best when it is a catalyst for change, when it's doing its long-range transportation planning and it's planning for our urban growth boundary. That is a lot to chew on, and it needs to maintain its competency in that area. Metro also has other operations. So it's got waste management, it's got the visitor centers, and it's got regional parks. It's enough of an operational load on Metro as it is. So I understand why folks might want that, but I think TriMet needs to work on TriMet's issues, and being somebody who uses the service, I would be happy to be a bully pulpit for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Smith, your thoughts on this?
So I believe that would be a last resort. I believe the best model is one where you have one organization planning and another organization implementing, so you've got an arm's length between those two functions. We don't see that, for example, at ODOT, where they both plan freeway expansions and then implement them. I'd love to see Metro get the authority to do the long-range planning for highways within the region. But as has been indicated, TriMet needs to step up, and it's not doing that. It is not planning for the kind of transit expansion that needs to happen to meet our greenhouse gas goals. So I would certainly be willing to threaten to take over TriMet if that's what it takes to get them to step up to the role they need to play, but I'd only actually do it as a very last resort. Thanks.
Thank you. Mayor Nolan, should Metro take over?
I'm having trouble hearing you.
A fabulous partner with TriMet to envision a world where we have a transit system that Portlanders love, that people flock to, that is timely, accessible, convenient, clean, welcoming, affordable, maybe even fareless, because that's what it takes to have a wonderful, livable, prosperous region. Transportation, and particularly public transportation, is a key to our prosperity and our livability. And I think Metro has an opportunity to really support TriMet in thinking about the way transit will look like in the future. Not just buses and fixed line rail, but moving toward the future where we can get where we want to go without polluting and at low cost.
Thank you very much. Cameron Whitten, should Metro take over TriMet? Why or why not?
Thanks, Colin. My answer is no. Metro needs to focus right now on how to build a regional affordable housing plan. It is not in a position to take on a very large independent bureaucracy right now. And I think even if we did, it would have a lot of unintended consequences. I had the privilege to work with TriMet for 3 years and to see progress because of independence, whether it's low-income fare, a free discount program for nonprofits, even many steps towards decriminalization of fare evasion and other activities on transit. I do support the need for systemic transformation. We are not seeing enough urgency around electrification of buses and other goals that local users of TriMet want to see. And so we should explore TriMet board of directors being elected by the region, but I don't think that Metro itself should be taking over TriMet. Metro needs to be a partner as a planning agency supporting the implementation of world-class transit.
Thank you very much. Mary Pivito.
So, I've never actually seen a credible threat to doing something that actually doesn't have a conviction to carry through. And so, yes, I do believe that Metro should start the process of convening the conversation of what would it take to take over TriMet, and or why wouldn't we? And I think that conversation needs to have. TriMet has lagged for too long. It's lagged in terms of increased ridership. It's lagged in terms of air quality. It's decades behind. It's the dirtiest transit system on the West Coast, and that is an affront, I think, to the values of our region. Yes, we have got to look at leadership. Leadership needs to be appointed locally, and that's the problem. It's an unelected a board of governance that is allowing it to be out of step with the values of our region. Metro has been deeply linked with public transportation since its inception, and I think it seems like a really obvious role for for Metro to look at governance of TriMet.
Thank you very much. Many of you have referenced the I-5 Rose Quarter Freeway expansion project that ODOT seems to be eagerly moving forward with. The current budget, I believe, last time I looked, is around $700 million, so that has increased a couple times. Do you trust, as a key partner for ODOT, do you trust ODOT to carry out this project in a way that takes in genuine community feedback and completes the project on its current budget? We'll start with Chris, then Mary, Nolan, then Cameron Witten, then Mary Pivito, then Karen Smith. Chris.
So absolutely not. I don't trust ODOT to do much of anything. You will have seen in the press this week that they're talking about the Highway Trust Fund being bankrupt in a few years. That's because they're busy building things instead of maintaining the assets they have. ODOT is one of three governments in the region that's not accountable to the voters locally. The others are TriMet and Port of Portland, all of which have boards that are appointed out of Salem rather than locally. So a state senator in Southern Oregon has more say about who governs those agencies than the voters in this region do. And I think that's one of the key reasons I'm running for this position, to make Metro a force to stand up to ODOT. I've already mentioned I'd like to see Metro get the responsibility for long-range planning for highways within the urban area rather than having ODOT do that. This project is a disaster. It's an air quality disaster. It's a noise and pollution disaster, and it won't achieve the benefit. Because of induced demand, the new lanes will simply be clogged up again in a few years. Thanks.
Thank you. Mary Nolan, do you trust ODOT to respond genuinely to community feedback and deliver the Rose Quarter Freeway expansion without further budget escalations?
I trust ODOT to deliver the plan. And I think this echoes back to a question you asked us earlier, Colin, about an instance where you have to compromise. And I think this is an example of very sophisticated and yet humble compromise. The original proposal from the ODOT engineers was truly appalling. But local leaders, including Metro President Lynn Peterson, the mayor, the leaders, Rukiah Adams, and the leaders of Albina Vision pushed back. They asked for changes, and they got them. They were satisfied that ODOT has heard the concerns of historic displacement of the Black community, congestion, air pollution, and they got changes. And I support that effort. They've made compromises, and I think we should move on.
Thank you. Cameron Witten, do you trust ODOT to respond genuinely to community feedback and deliver the Rose Quarter Freeway expansion without further budget escalations?
Not at this time. The project is complex. It's something that we just got funding for recently. The community who lives in this region deserves to be a part of that conversation. We have seen some progress, but there needs to be a full environmental impact statement, because I do know that we can make this a better project than it currently is. as somebody who is a lifetime cyclist, I know that I have particular feelings, but I know that we're working in a region and this is a transportation area of regional concern. We need to have a better compromise than we currently have on the table. There's still a huge concern around whether we are aggressively pursuing reducing our carbon emissions. We all know that induced demand is a real thing. And so as we continue looking at this project, what can we do to ensure that even if this freeway is expanded, that we are meeting our climate goals? That's why I'm a big champion for congestion pricing. And I do think that we should stay at the table to make this the best project possible.
Thank you. Mary Pivito, do you trust ODOT to respond genuinely to community feedback and deliver the freeway expansion without further budget escalation?
No, I don't, and I don't think it's about trust. I think it's about reputation and fact. I mean, they haven't. That's clear. They dismissed the community input about asking for an environmental impact statement, and they completely dismissed that. And they dismissed that ask from, frankly, the Speaker of the House and the governor also weighing in and asking for that as a prerequisite of moving forward. So it's very clear. I don't think this is a subjective call to say that you can't trust this agency to deliver for the community's concerns around a large project. And again, though, handing a congested piece of freeway over to ODOT to fix is like going to the surgeon and asking, what should I do about my back? You're going to get an expanded freeway from ODOT because that's the only tool in the toolbox. I agree 100% with Chris. Planning for this should be at our regional level, made decisions by our communities and our community elected leaders. And no, I do not trust ODOT.
Thank you very much. Karen Spencer, do you trust ODOT to respond to community feedback and deliver the Rose Quarter expansion without further budget escalation?
I am skeptical of ODOT being able to do that. And as a Metro councilor, what I'd be looking to do is advocate and champion for a comprehensive plan that brings in our community members, that has public engagement. What we need to do is set what our values are for the area of the Rose Quarter. Things I would be looking at as we start thinking about values is the environmental impact, addressing historical racism in our Portland and our region's planning history, thinking about access to the river, thinking about how we can get affordable housing there, and thinking about economic opportunities. How are we going to make that area a better place for the long term, not just for today, but for the long term, because this is going to be a substantial investment.
Thank you. Our last question before we transition to audience Q&A is a little more meta. Collectively, the five of you have raised an impressive $192,000 for a district seat on an under-the-radar agency. That is a number I pulled a couple days ago. It's probably more than that by today. To what extent do you feel like this is a reasonable and necessary level of fundraising? And do you support Metro adopting something similar to the City of Portland's Open and Accountable Elections program? We'll start with Mary Nolan, then Cameron Whitten, then Mary Pivito, then Karen Spencer, then Chris Smith. Mary Nolan, please.
Thanks, Colin. You left out an important piece that helps us scale your question. There are 150,000 registered voters in this district. At least 100,000 of them are likely to turn in ballots. That means all five of us need to be communicating with 100,000 people. At the number you proposed, that means among us, we have spent $2 communicating with each voter. I don't think that's excessive at all. And particularly this year, when there are 54 candidates on every ballot in this district for positions on city council. And to be able to get through some of that noise requires spending a little bit of money. The last time I checked, the post office requires that we pay cash for postage. As to the question about public financing and campaign finance reform, I championed initiatives in the legislature and supported local initiatives, and I think we ought to look at that for Metro.
Thank you very much. Cameron Whitten, to what extent does this level of fundraising feel reasonable, and do you support Metro adopting public financing and campaign finance reform?
Thank you, Colin. I think what Mary Nolan just said is misleading. Our Secretary of State sends out a voter's pamphlet statement to everyone who's registered to vote. We have websites. We have the opportunity for a level playing field for people to be informed about these elections. It is so sad to see the resort to which we should be talking to voters instead of having to talk to big money donors. The biggest person who's donated in this campaign was a corporate PAC that donated $7,500. I'm honored to be a part of a campaign that has the highest number of unique donors. We have raised over $34,000 with an average donation of $58 from 500 people. So yes, we need to have real campaign finance reform. We've seen the Supreme Court finally give us the opportunity to do that. I'm honored to see the diversity, the historic diversity of candidates that are running for office for City of Portland. We need to see that same kind of leadership at the metro level. And I know as a working class person, as someone who experienced homelessness, that I'm fortunate to be in a place where I can run a good campaign, but that needs to be for everybody.
Thank you. Mary Pivito, your thoughts on this?
I do believe in campaign finance reform. I was horrified after years of beating my head against the state legislature trying to figure out why a place like Oregon doesn't regulate in the areas of environmental regulation. It was the really the national award-winning story, Polluted by Money, that kind of made it clear how much money is influencing our politics here in Oregon. And that's across the board, and that's not a blue-red divide. So yes, I believe in public finance, the campaign finance reform, and I believe in all those initiatives. I agree with the fact that, you know, we do have mechanisms to reach our voters and to help inform them. And thanks to City Club for having forums like this, and thanks for the engaged organizations. I think we have got to get money out of politics. We have got to neutralize these massive donations from very big special interest groups that are giving to one candidate. Why? What do they expect? What do they think they're buying?
Thank you very much. Karen Spencer, to what extent do you feel like this is a reasonable level of fundraising? And do you support Metro adopting something similar to the City of Portland's open and accountable elections program?
I would support campaign finance reform for the Metro role. As a first-time candidate, as a woman of color, I would like to see more people enter the public and civic space, and it is a tough road to be able to do that. And if we're going to diversify our government, we're going to have to make it much more inclusive and a much more balanced and level playing field. I also support it because what I really want to be doing is talking to voters, and having to make those fundraising calls is necessary in this environment. But I'd much rather hear from the voter about what their concerns are, particularly as we're going through this COVID crisis. I have meaningful conversations with folks, and I'd like to have many, many more. So I would be very supportive of it at the Metro level.
Thank you very much. Chris Smith, close us out with your thoughts on this matter.
So 20 years ago in the 2000 election cycle, I chaired the City Club Study Committee for Measure 6, which was the first public campaign finance proposal in the state of Oregon that would have applied to state offices. It failed statewide, but it passed in Portland. And that was the germ that eventually led to the voter-owned election system in Portland, Portland's first attempt at public campaign finance. I ran under that system. I had to get 1,000 people to give me $5 to qualify for public funding. I believe very much in public campaign finance as an antidote to big money, and I would welcome Metro having such a system. Because I believe that, you know, elections should not be influenced by big money, I have voluntarily limited contributions to my campaign to $500 because voters in this district have twice passed that limit, once for city offices, once for county offices. We have not had a similar measure for Metro, but I would certainly welcome one. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. For those of you just tuning in, this is City Club of Portland coming to you with our virtual debate for Metro District 5 with Karen Spencer, Cameron Witten, Mary Nolan, Mary Pivito, and Chris Smith. I'm your moderator, Colin Jones, and I'm asking you to support City Club with a donation now by texting Support City Club to 44321 so that we can keep bringing you this important election coverage. We're now going to go through some questions that we've received from the public. First off, how would you tap the expertise of people closest to the challenges the region faces and who may be underrepresented in local and regional government? We'll start with Cameron Whitten, then Mary Pivito, Karen Spencer, Chris Smith, and then Mary Nolan. Cameron Whitten. You are muted, Cameron.
Yeah, I'm unmuted now. Thank you. That is an excellent question. And it's something, as someone with lived experience of homelessness, it's been over 2 decades since we've had a Black person on Metro Council. We have a huge issue with lack of representation. And we also know, as our regional government, we're out here talking to voters. We've called over 20,000 voters so far. And we're constantly hearing from folks who don't understand the work that Metro does. And we know that our regional government, Metro, needs to have a more intimate relationship with our people. That leadership starts from the council. If you look at everybody who's running for office right now and every person who's currently on Metro Council, I have the largest social media presence. You've seen with our campaign, with innovative virtual neighborhood town halls, with online web series, that we can be more innovative in ways that we are engaging people who are formerly not at the table. One of the top reasons why I'm running is to make a bigger table for everyone. You can find that platform around civic engagement and diverse representation on my website, wittenfororegon.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Pivito, how would you tap into the expertise of people closest to the
Thank you. And thank you for repeating it, because I was actually texting to support City Club. 44321. No, I honestly, in criticizing or in seeing limitations of the transportation package, I don't think, because we only had a minute, that we spent enough time saying what the transportation package did well, which was convene people. I think the direction and the leadership of President Peterson is really bringing back what brought Metro to us in the first place, which was to convene people together and really talk about how to build a system together. So I would like Metro to continue to do that. I think the transportation package reflects that. I think it reflected a lot of great public meetings, and it took input from a broad cross-section of the community, and it shows that we increased a lot of good areas of safety and choice that are important to communities. So I want to see Metro continue to really elevate that process. 18 meetings is probably not too few when you're building a $7 billion investment package.
Thank you very much. Karen Spencer, your thoughts on that?
Could you restate the question just to make sure I have it?
Absolutely. How would you tap into the expertise of people closest to the challenges that the region faces who may be underrepresented in local and regional government?
So I believe, as others have said, and I've said before, that Metro is great at bringing people to the table and in encouraging public engagement. We need to do more of that, particularly for our refugee and immigrant and English as second language communities. And one thing that we can do as counselors is ensure that we're having our meetings at times of day when working folks can make it, and in locations where working folks can make it as well, so that we're getting out into the community and talking to our constituents across the board. The district is quite large, and we have a huge number of people, and we should be going throughout the district to make sure that we have as much engagement as possible on these critical issues of livability.
Thank you very much. Chris Smith, your thoughts on how you tap into expertise of those who may be underrepresented in local and regional government.
Yeah, I've had the privilege as an activist of being able to be deeply involved because I had a career that allowed me the schedule flexibility to show up at public meetings, the means to get there. That's not true for everyone. I think we're learning an interesting lesson right now in enabling online testimony. And I think we might see in the future that we want to blend in-person testimony and online testimony so that somebody doesn't necessarily have to get downtown to City Hall or to the Metro Regional Center to testify. I also think, if we're asking somebody to be on a committee that's going to meet 18 times to make a recommendation, maybe we should pay them a stipend to do that if we're going to ask for that much of their time, because not everyone can afford that amount of time. I also think it's important to provide childcare when we're asking people to take time away from their normal home setting and be involved. So I think there are a lot of ways that we can make it easier for people to be involved, and we should be actively exploring those. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Mary Nolan, how would you tap into the expertise of those who may be underrepresented in local and regional government?
Thanks, Colin. There are two aspects of this. One is organizational and community representatives and leaders. And I have a track record of bringing together leaders of communities directly affected by public policies, whether it was in the Reproductive Health Equity Act, in which we brought the Latino Health Coalition and APANO and Western States and other groups representing communities that have a direct stake. But there's also the personal, hearing the stories, hearing the experience. And there have been some great ideas that my fellow candidates have mentioned. But I think one of the really important things I've done that I'd like to bring to Metro is to create atmospheres where there's an equal footing, where it isn't intimidating. When I was at the legislature, we didn't just hold hearings in Salem. We took hearings out across the state, so you didn't have to travel all the way to Salem and be in this unfamiliar space. Metro can
Thank you very much.
Around the region.
Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about COVID-19 recovery. What economic reforms would you champion to support the region in recovering and hopefully thriving following the epidemic? We'll start with Mary Pivito, then Karen Spencer, Chris Smith, Mary Nolan, and then Cameron Whitten. Mary Pivito.
Thank you. This is going to be tough. And Metro's not going to be as protected through waste management collection as it was through the recession in this situation. We're seeing, a 15% occupancy rate in our hotels and our public spaces, and Metro has felt this as deeply as our whole region has felt it, and our businesses have felt it. It had to make the tough decision when it closed its convening spaces. It had to make the decision to lay off folks. But now Metro can look at its own budget. It's going to have to make some really hard decisions. It's going to have to figure out with the community together how we reopen, what reopening looks like, what criteria we use to bring back gatherings, at what scale, what level. It also can look at its own budget to make hard choices, but there's a lot of places in the budget where it could probably look first to see where positions aren't currently filled, or they were new positions, that it could make cuts where it's not actually affecting people's jobs yet, and look at the budget.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Karen Spencer, what reforms or efforts would you champion to support economic recovery from COVID-19?
So in the short term, Metro should continue what it's doing now, which is collaborating with other organizations and ensure that it is being supportive through this crisis. As we look at economic recovery, we have to think about the safety of our community members, the safety of the Metro workers, and ensuring that we are providing sufficient precautions against this pandemic from a health standpoint. And then in the intermediate and longer term, we've got to look at jobs and jobs recovery, and I'm supportive for that reason of the transportation measure that's under consideration, because of the fact that a conservative estimate is that 37,500 direct and indirect jobs are going to be created from that measure, and Metro should also be doing a more comprehensive plan for our region economically in conjunction with the other government entities so that we can come out as fast and as strong as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Smith, what would you champion in order to support economic recovery following COVID-19?
So we talked a little bit earlier about what the scope of Metro is and whether Metro is engaged in scope creep. It's important to remember Metro is not an economic development agency, although certainly the planning functions it has impact economic development. We do have a regional economic development agency, Greater Portland, Inc., and I was very happy to see that Metro was partnering with Greater Portland, Inc. to look at how the grant dollars that Metro disperses, Metro doesn't have a big general fund. It's got a lot of very specific funds for different purposes because of the way Metro is set up. But Metro is looking at how within what's allowed for the funds it is dispersing, how can it help tweak those to point towards recovery. So I think that's very smart. My bigger concern is about the visitor facilities, the convention center, the zoo, the expo center, the Portland 5. Those are probably going to be among the last facilities to reopen because they host very, very large gatherings of people. And I would want to make sure that Metro is planning for how we successfully keep those facilities mothballed so they can come back when the time comes. For example, There's a
Thank
brown
you.
piece.
Thank you very much. Mary Nolan, what efforts would you champion to support economic recovery?
First thing I will want to do at Metro is make sure that we are prepared for the next widespread disaster, whether it is medical or earthquake or other event. Metro suffers now because it didn't really have an emergency response plan in place that collaborated with other regions. And the first thing we need to do, I'm interested in helping with, is to fix that. Secondly, in terms of economic recovery, we know that investing in long-term assets that will support prosperity, livability, is a key way that has always worked and will work again here to stimulate economic recovery. And I think we need to make sure we are squeezing every bit of value out of the already approved green spaces and affordable housing bond measures. And should the voters approve a transportation package, use that as a job stimulant to get the economy going.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Cameron Whitten, round us out. What are your thoughts on this?
Thanks, Colin. As I end my 20s, sadly, the beginning and the end has been marked with systems-wide economic emergencies. Metro is uniquely impacted by this, considering the 40% layoff of workers due to the pandemic. This is where my economics background kicks in. I have an economics degree from Portland State University. We have to really have leadership towards the economic recovery. Metro does have a limited role, as said earlier. We have to use what we do have, which is both a strong, resilient research and data center, so that we are working with our industries and with our local governments to really have a deep look into the industries that have been put offline and our health systems have been put offline. And we need to use that to help guide funding priorities. We can't be looking at our bonds and levies, because those things are being tied down by purchasing, by planning, and politics. We have to be looking towards real, immediate economic stimuluses. That's why I'm a board member of Venture Portland, and we have to continue to fight for our small businesses and our workers. That's where priority is.
Thank you very much. The Willamette Cove is a 27-acre property owned by Metro and is one of the most contaminated properties in the Portland Superfund site. It sits in what potentially will be your district. What is your vision for how Metro will recover and make use of this property going forward? We'll start with Karen Spencer, then Chris Smith, then Mary Nolan, then Cameron Whitten, then Mary Pivito. Karen Spencer.
Thank you, Colin. The issues with this are so complex. What I want to see is us having a vision for this property that is robust, that we are turning it back into its natural state to the extent that we possibly can. Working with Metro's Nature Neighborhoods Capital Grants Committee, I saw how we were able to improve our natural spaces over time and with diligence in a concerted effort as we were bringing groups together. So what I would be looking for this property is to work collaboratively, to bring folks together, and to have a vision that helps in the far future. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Smith, how should Metro approach the recovery and use of the Willamette Cove Superfund site?
So I think it's important to recognize that Willamette Cove is one piece of a much larger harbor cleanup. And I think that Metro, of course, needs to take responsibility for its property within that. But I think in the larger picture, Metro needs to be an active voice for a well-done harbor cleanup job. There's been a lot of negotiation between EPA and industries, and we have a local governance structure for that cleanup as well. Metro needs to keep its eye on the overall outcomes. I think there are opportunities using West Hayden Island perhaps as a mitigation bank, as part of helping preserve West Hayden Island, 800 acres of habitat, rather than having it be turned over for development of a marine terminal that honestly our economy doesn't need. So keep our eye on the big picture. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Mary Nolan, your thoughts?
For me, this is pretty simple. Metro is a responsible party. as there are many others. And the most important thing for Metro to do is own its responsibilities, implement the improvements, the restoration that are included in the EPA plan, and demonstrate to the other responsible parties what it's like to be a good neighbor, to be a good property owner, and to be a leader.
Thank you very much. Cameron Whitten.
Thanks, Colin. As mentioned, this is a complex issue, and we are dealing with decades and decades of inaction. And we know this is a serious equity issue because there are communities that are using the Willamette around the Superfund sites. We have to continue to educate the public that this is a serious issue and that there is a human impact and there's an impact to our natural wildlife. And so Metro does need to be accountable, and we have to continue to work strongly with the EPA so that we do see all the responsible parties at the table. It's going to be hard, but the important thing is that we are keeping this issue front and center, because it does seem like with all of our different priorities that it's hard for folks to understand the urgency of addressing this. And that's the reality. The more that we really keep this on the table with our agenda with a real timeline, the more that we can actually get the urgency with all of our responsible partners to make this happen.
Thank you very much. Mary Pivito, how should Metro approach the recovery and use of the Willamette Cove Superfund site?
Well, I think very much like the housing crisis and the affordable and the housing service measure, where there was a coalition of community-based groups that really led and helped set the priorities, that's what Metro has the opportunity to do here. There is an incredibly strong coalition, Portland Harbor Community Coalition, that represents the folks and people who are living and using the river and sustaining their life near the river and have historically done before pollution existed. And so this is the community group that Metro needs to center in the discussion. They've already put together their priority list. They want to be part of the job creation that happens coming out of the EPA Superfund work. They want to have livable, potentially housing near the river, adequate access to the river, and they want the river to be clean and back and invested to go back to what it was. So I think that this coalition Metro needs to listen and center the coalition and community work that's been done to identify how to move forward.
Thank you very much. We received a few follow-up questions that I'm going to try and integrate together, so bear with me just a little bit as I kind of do this on the fly. So folks are wondering particularly about the Portland 5 Center for the Arts. And so far they have claimed a need to lay off remaining staff, potentially mothball the venues, and are talking about an increase in rental fees of up to 30%. Which would have a pretty significant impact on the various arts organizations that use these venues. So what policies will you advance related to the Portland 5 Center for the Arts, and to what extent will this be a priority in how Metro responds during the COVID-19 recovery? We'll start with Chris Smith, then Mary Nolan, then Cameron Whitten, then Mary Pivito, then Karen Spencer.
Right. So, as I said previously, I think it's important that we have a plan how we bring back all the visitor facilities when it's appropriate to have large gatherings of people again. I think there's some unique challenges with the Portland 5. Those facilities are actually owned by the city of Portland, but under intergovernmental agreement are operated by Metro. So I think the city needs to have some partnership in solving this. And there's a particular challenge with the new theater building that's part of the Portland 5 in that there's a ground lease for the land underneath that is owned by an adjoining property owner. And that, frankly, probably needs to be renegotiated because it's rising more rapidly than is sustainable. So I don't have an overall easy answer for how to make that facility work, but it's something that Metro should be putting time and planning into now before it reopens.
Thank you very much. Mary Nolan, to what extent is the Portland 5 Center for the Arts a priority for you, and what policies would you advocate for to keep the facility useful following COVID-19?
More broadly, Colin, arts, culture, interchange, storytelling, music, are all very important to me. I think they're all very important to most of our neighbors. I serve on a nonprofit performing and cultural organization, Teatro Milagro, that provides fabulous connections, or did. Now we're doing it virtually and online. I want to roll the tape back a little bit on the Portland 5, because even before COVID, Metro was not operating as a good partner. Metro had, at the very last minute, after the tenants of the P5 had already prepared and approved their budgets for the next year, Metro came in and said, we're jacking up your rent significantly, 30, 40, 50% in some cases. That's not the way to be a partner, and I'd like to change that. I don't dismiss that there are very difficult financial issues with the Portland 5, but I think it starts with a really good partner.
Thank you very much. Cameron Whitten, what is your perspective on this?
Thanks, Colin. And this is a big issue that we need to get right. As mentioned earlier, we're in a complex situation where we do have a shared lease situation, but that doesn't change the fact that our arts organization shouldn't wake up one day and get an email saying your rents are going up 30% overnight. The reality is that this is going to be a challenging situation, and Metro has to be a good partner, and we have to take a brunt of this challenging situation. We need our arts venue. If this goes away, I have doubts that we will ever be able to have a public, permanently affordable arts space, and we know that's vibrant to our community. One example of how Metro is doing it right is our Expo Center. They have formed a sustainability advisory committee to see how can we address these long-term challenges. It's not going to address the immediate need to ensure that there's stability for our arts organizations. We need to figure out whether that's looking at our visitor taxes or lodging taxes or some other things. But we have to also have a long-term community stakeholding process like we did with the Expo Center to ensure that this doesn't happen again.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mary Pivito, what would be your approach for the Portland 5 Center for the Arts?
I agree that these are shared facilities and shared responsibility. Metro has had some very, very difficult choices, as Mary pointed to, that preceded the COVID virus, and this COVID virus is devastating to the arts community. And yet, arts, this is the treasure of Portland, and the residents of Portland have affirmed this through passing a pretty innovative arts tax. The arts tax in implementation, I'm not here to defend, but I think it shows and demonstrates a value that our community has for arts in our community. And I think we need to convene and figure out if there's opportunities to take that commitment that our community has already shown and find out if we can invest that money better, work collaboratively with the city of Portland, who we do co-own these or co-operate these with. And it's going to take some really tough conversations, and we're going to have to be creative, but what a better space than our arts to be as creative and innovative as possible to discuss how to keep these critical pieces open.
Thank you. And Karen Spencer, what would be your priorities and approach related to the Portland 5 Center for the Arts?
So my husband's a musician. I am an amateur improv actor, and I am deeply immersed in our arts culture from the music scene and actors. And it's this crisis, even before this crisis, they were struggling. We had actors in the arts that were already struggling, and this is worse. And I think that first, as Metro Council, I'm going to be looking at ensuring that that segment of our community is incorporated in any economic recovery plan, because our arts industry brings so much vitality and vibrancy to our region. Second would do our utmost to figure out how we can keep the center going. Our health concerns, so we have to make sure it's safe to have artistic forms, and then ensure that we are keeping it open, because we desperately do need to have the arts in our community.
Thank you very much. And that is unfortunately all the time that we have for questions today. So we're going to move to closing remarks. You'll each have 2 minutes to share with our audience and voters why they should vote for you for Metro District 5. We'll begin with Cameron Whitten.
Thank you all for this amazing town hall. I'm running for Metro because I bring a unique combination of lived experience, of executive leadership, and policy vision that Metro has never seen before and can benefit a lot from. We are in a time where we're facing an uncertain future. And this is the perfect time for us to evaluate the ways in which our system was not working. For many, we knew that there weren't just cracks in the system, there were chasms. And I know now, because of the coronavirus, we're seeing that urgent, bold leadership is needed. I know from my personal experience and my own life struggles how to overcome uncertain futures. And I also know, as a nonprofit executive leader, helping multiple nonprofits exit out of crisis, that I can do this job. I'm honored, again, to have the support of over 150 community leaders and organizations. And I know that we need to work together to channel our hope, our resilience, and our courage so that we do emerge from this as strong and resilient as possible. I would love to have your support, and I would love to earn that. Please be in touch with our campaign. My website is wittenfororegon.com. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mary Pivito, please share your 2-minute closing remarks with us.
So our region is facing huge challenges. We need to address our housing crisis, and we need to provide the services to make people successfully transition into permanent housing. We also need bold leadership to tackle the climate crisis so our children have a planet to live on. Like COVID-19, the climate crisis affects communities of color, lower income families, and those that don't have access to health care the most. I've grounded all of my work at Neighbors for Clean Air in the fundamental value we must listen to and protect the communities most impacted. This must be front and center in the work we do to transform our economy in the coming months and years. That means workers first and our small businesses back up and running. While our future is uncertain, there's one thing we can count on. Working together, we have the power to meet the massive challenges that face our communities. Never again shall we believe large corporations and conservatives when they say they can't change the systemic factors that contribute to our climate crisis. It's now very clear we can shift our economy, our transportation infrastructure, and the way we do business to save lives. The curve heading our way from carbon emissions is more severe than the one we currently face with the novel coronavirus. We must elect leaders who are both capable of meeting this existential challenge and willing to take action. As powerless as I felt as a white woman speaking to decision makers, it's obvious how many voices aren't being heard from our most resilient frontline communities, people of color, people living in poverty, immigrants, and refugees. As Metro Councilor, I'll be a voice of the decision making, but I'm going to bring those voices in, the impacted communities we need to hear from to find the solutions to our biggest problems, based on shared values and the lived experience of people in our region. I'm Mary Pivito. I'm asking for your vote so I can fight for you at Metro Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary Pivito. Karen Spencer, please.
I've always been engaged in volunteer activities throughout my whole career, and I never thought that I would run for office until August 2017, Charlottesville happened. And at that moment, I realized that we need people of color in leadership positions in government and also in the private sector. And I heard that call and I stepped up and I began this journey. And the reason why I began this journey is because I love our community and I want current and future residents to love what I love about it too. Our friendliness, our ability to get things done, our ability to come together as a region to solve complex issues. And we do have them now. We have to tackle houselessness and housing affordability in order for us to have the thriving communities that we want in the future. And I have the skill set, having worked at small, medium-sized, and large businesses in a leadership capacity to be able to address these complex issues. I also have the background to address them too. I am a chemical engineer. I graduated from MIT. I graduated from Harvard Law School and Stanford Business School. And I will bring much needed diversity to Metro Council. And we know that diverse teams do better in decision making because you're bringing new and different voices to tackle challenges, and that creates innovation. So I've asked for your vote before May 19th, and I am Karen Spencer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen Spencer. Chris Smith, please.
Thank you. Let's talk about District 5 a little bit. District 5 is a fossil fuel sacrifice zone. From the levees on the Columbia, which the Army Corps of Engineers is now evaluating because they will be under more pressure from intense winter storms, to the 5 freeways that border and bisect the district, creating significant air quality issues. From the oil trains traveling through the district to the central energy hub at Linton, a time bomb waiting to literally explode during an earthquake, the district is at risk due to fossil fuels. And let's not forget the auto scrapyards in the Cully neighborhood and the mountain of tires that burned a few years ago, forcing the evacuation of vulnerable neighbors. District 5 should be sending a climate champion to Metro. I've been that advocate for decades, for example, fighting off the siting of a propane terminal on the Columbia, which would have been in District 5, and leading the opposition to freeway widening in the region. That's why this baby boomer has been endorsed by Sunrise, the youth climate movement. They know that I have a demonstrated record of successfully fighting for carbon reduction and a sustainable urban environment. As Willamette Week and the Portland Mercury made clear in their endorsements, I've demonstrated that I can dive into the details, decode the acronyms, analyze the budgets, and tie it all back to policy to advance progressive goals around housing and climate. I spent 20 years preparing for this role, and I ask for your vote in this election. You can learn more about our campaign at chrisformetro.com. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Mary Nolan, close us out with your 2-minute statement.
Thanks. Thanks to City Club for hosting this conversation, and thanks to my fellow candidates. Thanks also to our civic-minded audience. Even in the blissful days of January, we knew Metro had big responsibilities and big opportunities to lift the Portland area up. And since then, the COVID-19 pandemic has sounded an urgent wake-up call. We are in this together. We need each other. I am a steady hand, an experienced policymaker, an astute coalition builder, and I have a deep passion for this special land called Portland. I've helped plan and mobilize emergency response systems for Oregon and Portland. I'm ready to help shape region-wide capabilities to mitigate future disasters and to ignite an equitable, broad-based, and quick recovery from this one. As Willamette Week noted, these are their words, not mine, I'm among the most savvy, effective legislators Portland has seen. Portland Tribune endorsed me because I have a sharp mind and am tested. The Oregonian endorsed me, saying I easily rise to the top as voters' best choice. I'm Mary Nolan. And if you live in Northeast, North Portland, Northwest, downtown, or that little slice of Southwest north of Highway 26, I'm asking for your vote so I can deliver big, bold results for your priorities. We'll rise again together. Juntos. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary Nolan. Our time is up today. Thank you so much to candidates Mary Pivito, Karen Spencer, Chris Smith, Mary Nolan, and Cameron Whitten for joining us today. And thanks to all of you for joining us from home. Whoever you choose to vote for, be sure to get your ballot in by May 19th. Thank you again to today's sponsors, The Standard, SEIU 49, and Northwest Natural, and to our incredible, amazing, wonderful media partners, KGW and X-Ray FM. In order for City Club to continue to provide quality, in-depth information to voters, especially in these wild and mildly, maybe very scary times, we need your support. Make a donation today, whatever you can give, but $5 or $15. If everyone gave $5, that would meet our goal. Just text Support City Club, that's one word, Support City Club, to 44321. Let's all work together to keep democracy moving forward. Thank you so much. Let's find out what's possible when we truly make space for everyone to connect, share ideas, and build for the future. We are adjourned.
Thank you, and thank you to our signers. I appreciate it.